Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. Happy Wednesday to everybody. Man, we've only got like 10 more days until we kick off between Miami and Florida for week 0, the first Power 5 game of the year. But what I'm going to do today is an extension of a video that I've done every year that I've been on YouTube just prior to the start of the season, and that is Darkhorse teams to win their conference. Okay. Now, what constitutes a Darkhorse team? Well, I mean, it's just that. It's not necessarily a bottom dweller that's going to do well. What I'm saying is constituting a dark horse team is a team that could possibly, a small percentage, but possibly make a run to win their conference that really nobody's talking about or nobody considers a real viable factor to do so. So I'll pick one single team, even though in some conferences there might be multiple dark horses, but I had to pick one just for the purposes of this video. And this, some of these conferences, I went back and forth between a couple teams, but I'm going to pick one. So you're going to have one in the Big Ten, one in the Big 12, one in the Pac-12, one in the SEC, and obviously one in the ACC. That could be a dark horse to compete for the conference championship. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. But before I do that, everybody make sure that you know that this show and every show here in the Pigskin Pete YouTube studios is sponsored by betnow.eu. Visit the link in the description of this video and every other video that I upload in here. Click that link. Deposit money if you want to wager on college football this season or any other sport. And a portion of your donation, portion of your deposit, I guess I should say. Now, it's not a donation. Listen, it's not a donation. You're actually playing with the money that you deposit. It's not like you're donating money to a charity, but they will take a percentage of the amount of money that you do deposit, and they will donate that to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Make sure you use the link. That's the key to this. If you want any money to go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Also, if you want to get a bonus, make sure you use the promo code Peete, P-E-E-T-E, and they will give you a 50% bonus on your deposit. So, for all you guys out there that are deficient in the math category, if you donate, I keep saying donate. If you deposit $100, they'll give you $150 to play with. It's a free $50. So that's the way that works. All right, so let's get right into this here. We will start with the Big Ten. The Big Ten is one of these conferences that I think have multiple dark horse teams, right? So first of all, let's look at the top of the Big Ten. Obviously, Michigan and Ohio State are always at the top, even though Michigan hasn't done a damn thing since Harbaugh got there, except for lose the division every year and lose every big game that they played, for the most part. But let's look further down the list. You've got teams like Northwestern. Northwestern won the Big Ten West last year. They were definitely a dark horse. But here's the bottom line. As good as Northwestern was last year, which they weren't really that good. They got blown out by Duke. And they were like a 4 or 5 loss team going into the championship game, and then got drummed by Ohio State. But teams like Nebraska. So look, Nebraska is the one I'm picking, and I think this is not a hot take or anything. I think everybody's picking Nebraska to be the dark horse team to compete for the Big Ten. There's a lot of reasons for this. Number one, Scott Frost has high expectations. Scott Frost is only going to his second year at Nebraska. Second. And people are already expecting him to win the Big Ten and all this other sort of thing. Look, Rome wasn't built overnight. I realize Nebraska is a storied program. I realize they have all the tradition and the fan base is amazing and the stadium's amazing and all of that. But it still is a work in progress. But I'm picking them for one reason and one reason only, or 2 reasons. Number one is because Scott Frost, in his previous 2 jobs before Nebraska, took a team that was really struggling, and within his second year had them, competing for conferences and even better in some situations. Now, this is a different animal than what he was dealing with before, because he's dealing with a major program and a major conference now. I get all that. But he does have one of the finalists, one of the preseason finalists for Heisman at quarterback, Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez is the real deal, folks. I'll give you that. Scott Frost has recruited well. I'm getting a phone call here. Scott Frost has recruited well, but usually recruiting does not pay off year 1. It pays off year 2 and 3 and 4 and beyond, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the Big Ten West, Wisconsin last year, Wisconsin's always a really good team. They have another Heisman finalist, preseason finalist at running back. But outside of that, I mean, who is their biggest competition? I've seen a lot of people say Iowa State. Not Iowa State. Iowa State's in the Big 12. I'm seeing a lot of people say Iowa. Who else? Don't talk to me about Minnesota. Please stop it. Northwestern, I think, is going to be good, but not as good as they were last year. Listen, Northwestern last year went to the Big Ten West. It won the Big Ten West, went to the Big Ten Championship, and they didn't win a single out-of-conference game. As a matter of fact, the 4 losses that they had going into the conference championship were all out of conference. The only games they were won throughout the year were in the Big Ten. So that's just something to think about. So I think Nebraska is definitely a dark horse. Now, personally, I don't think Nebraska is going to win the Big Ten. But if I'm choosing a dark horse team to be able to compete for it, they would be the one that I chose. All right, let's move on to the Big 12. You have Oklahoma and Texas, right? The preemptive favorites. One of those two teams, most people believe, including Pigskin Pete, will be the Big 12 champion at the end of the year. Depending on how many losses either one of those schools have whenever they do win the Big 12, we'll decide whether or not they get into the playoffs or not. Outside of those two teams, though, who are we looking at here? Well, I mean, Baylor's in the dumpster right now. They've got some rebuilding to do. I mean, Art Briles has completely destroyed that program. West Virginia has lost their coach and a bunch of really good players, including Will Grier. Oklahoma State, I guess you could put in that category, right? I mean, Oklahoma State at least they have some continuity, especially at the coaching position. And Oklahoma State could be considered to be a dark horse team for sure. But I'm going to pick TCU. Why am I going to pick TCU? People have short memories. People look at last year. Last year, well, this will be the second year in a row that I picked TCU to be the dark horse in the Big 12. Last year, it was a major failure. I bet on coaches, and if you look at the coaching landscape throughout the Big 12, outside of Texas and Oklahoma, then Gary Patterson is definitely the model of stability and the model of just X's and O's. TCU is one of the only teams outside of Texas that plays real defense there in the Big 12. So TCU has a quarterback competition going on right now. It looks as if the favorite to win that starting job is the fifth-year senior Alex Delton. And he was named a captain at TCU, and I think he will probably be the one that takes the snap week 1, and, it's his job to lose. There is another guy that's really, really good behind him called Sonny Cumbie, I think his name is. I should have written this down. I think his name is Sonny Cumbie. But Gary Patterson did say in a recent press event that they are throwing the ball better downfield than they have in a long time. And that's really what a lot of the Big 12 offenses are predicated on. And we've seen in the past that TCU, their offense has been really a downfield offense. So that says a lot. I'm just betting, quite honestly, on Gary Patterson. That's really all it comes down to. Now, Iowa State, a lot of people are very high on Iowa State this year, and I really can't dispute that because I don't have enough knowledge or facts to back up, picking them as the dark horse. So I'm going to pick TCU as the dark horse in the Big 12. Let's move on to the SEC. Now, to me, this is easy. Now, this might just be to me because the SEC, when you talk about dark horses, it doesn't matter who you pick. If you pick Auburn, then I say that's not a dark horse. They're one of the blue chip programs in the SEC. LSU, that's not a dark horse, which it's not. A&M, that's not a dark horse. Florida, that's not a dark horse. I mean, you could pick any team in the SEC, except for maybe South Carolina, and maybe Vanderbilt, and maybe Kentucky, right? And they would say that's not a dark horse because those are really good programs. Okay, but I'm going to pick Missouri. I know what you're thinking. I already know what you're thinking before you even say it. So don't even say it. You can say it if you want to, but I'm going to ignore it. Well, that's just because Kelly Bryant's there. No, that has something to do with it. You know what else it has to do with? The rest of the football team and their schedule and their coaching. Missouri is a team that, even if they don't win the East, could very easily come in second place. And why do I say that? It's because of what I just said. It's because they have a veteran quarterback who's won a lot of football games. Listen, the narrative out there about Kelly Bryant being a bad quarterback who can't pass the ball is a lie. Number one, there's only one quarterback or maybe two quarterbacks in the ACC that could have beat Kelly Bryant out of his spot, and one of them's named Trevor Lawrence. And what does he have in common with every other quarterback in the country, aside from maybe Tua Tagovailoa, is that everybody would have been beaten out by Trevor Lawrence. That's how good Trevor Lawrence is. Kelly Bryant is not a bad quarterback. As a matter of fact, he's a pretty darn good one. He was 16-2 as a starter at Clemson, played in big games, played well. I mean, listen, you guys are the same ones that were telling me that if it weren't for Kelly Bryant, then that Clemson wouldn't have won a national title last year. So you can't say that and then turn around and tell me that he's a mediocre quarterback. So it doesn't make any sense. Aside from Kelly Bryant, they have an amazing running game. Their wide receivers are among the best in the SEC. Now, I don't know a whole lot about their defense, so I'll go ahead and give you that. I'm not an expert on Missouri's defense. I've spent much more time looking into the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball. But what I hear is that they have a really good linebacking core and their defensive line solid. This might be the best Missouri team talent-wise from top to bottom that you've seen since the last time that Missouri won the East whenever they first came into the SEC. So you couple all those things together, and then you add their schedule, which I believe is one amongst the easiest in the SEC. Out of the West, they drew Arkansas and Ole Miss, who are both not very good teams right now. And then, of course, they got to play their East schedule. Their non-conference schedule is not that hard either. So there's a very big chance that Missouri could win a lot of football games unless they just crap the bed and, blow it against some teams, which, we'll see. But if I had to pick one dark horse team based on the schedule and the talent, I'm picking Missouri out of the SEC. Fight me on that if you want to. You'll lose. All right, let's go to the ACC. Well, every team's a dark horse team in the ACC other than Clemson, aren't they? All right, so you can't consider Miami to be a dark horse. Who else are you going to pick? I mean, Louisville's terrible. They're in a transition. They got a new coach. Georgia Tech's terrible. They're in a transition. They got a new coach. Miami's the favorite to win the Coastal. They got a new coach, but he's been there, and they probably have the most talent in the Coastal Division. Oh God, I mean, NC State. No, stop it. They're not winning it. North Carolina, new coach. I mean, the ACC is so wide open with outside of Clemson that's not even funny right now. I think that my dark horse for the ACC is going to fit into the vast majority of other fans, and you might not consider it to be a dark horse because that's the sort of the second favorite team behind Clemson and Miami, or the first favorite team behind Clemson and Miami in the ACC, and that's the University of Virginia. Well, why is that a dark horse, Pete, when everyone thinks that they have a pretty good chance of winning that division? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when's the last time Virginia won the ACC? When's the last time that Virginia won the Coastal? It's been a long time. Virginia hasn't beat Virginia Tech. Listen, last year's Virginia Tech team was probably the worst defense that Bud Foster's been at Virginia Tech since the 80s. He's been there for like 33 years. Last year, the Virginia Tech defense was the worst that they've ever had. And guess what happened? Unfortunately, for UVA, Virginia Tech still beat Virginia. Now, Virginia did go on to have a good season. Virginia did go on to beat the ever-living snot out of the Gamecocks 28-0 in the Belk Bowl. That's right, 28-0. all these Gamecock fans out there talking about how the only reason they're no good is because they're in the SEC, and then they get blown out 28-0 by Virginia. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Anyways, yeah. So Bronco Mendenhall has done a very good job with that program. They're only getting better. They've been recruiting better. They're playing better. The Bryce Perkins, the preemptive starter at quarterback there, is a preseason favorite to be an All-American. So, look, Virginia's got a lot going for it. I think they're going to be really good this year. And I just don't know who else to pick, quite honestly. If you take Miami and you take Clemson out of the conversation there, I guess Duke is in that category, and that's only because David Cutcliffe is such a great coach, and he's so ingrained there. You know, I heard a stat today that blew my mind. I was listening to ESPNU and had David Cutcliffe as a guest on the First Team show this morning. You know, the entire time that David Cutcliffe has been at Duke, 12 years, they have never had a player transfer out of Duke to another program. Not one. Now, I don't care what you think about Duke. I don't care what you think about the ACC. That is an amazing stat, because usually when you have, subpar or even mediocre Power 5 teams that have good players, by the time they're a junior or senior, if they feel like they can go get a better opportunity somewhere else and win more games or whatever, raise their draft stock, they're Audi 5,000. They're out like a fat boy in dodgeball. And that just tells you the kind of program that David Cutcliffe is running over there at Duke, that nobody is transferred from there. Nobody. And, by the way, they had the number 6 overall pick in the draft and Daniel Jones this year. So, anyway, I love David Cutcliffe. I don't care if he never wins another football game as long as he lives. That is a real good football coach. Anyway, so I picked UVA for the ACC. Now, the Pac-12. Look, it would be easy to fall into the Utah trap. The narrative coming out of the Pac-12 is that Utah far and away has the best defensive line in the Pac-12, and that might be true. I heard that last year too, though. Now, if you're going to pick a dark horse, since Utah is such a favorite in the Pac-12 right now, outside of Washington and Oregon, and of course they're in the north, Utah's in the south, that would be easy. That's not a dark horse. Would you believe it if I told you that I thought that the dark horse, the key word here is dark horse, the dark horse in the Pac-12 is Southern California? Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Nobody has been harder on Southern California than me. I mean, it just is what it is. I don't even spend a whole lot of time covering the Pac-12 because they've been so terrible. And, they had like 4 bowl wins last year, and the same the year before. They've been nixed out of the playoffs for the past couple of years. They just really haven't had anybody that really, is that blue chip program. Washington's been really good, but not great. Oregon's, is sort of resurging now, and I believe Oregon's the dark horse to make the playoffs this year, in my opinion. But if we're looking at a dark horse to challenge either Oregon or Washington in the north, in the Pac-12 title game, I'm going to pick USC. And why? Well, JT Daniels is why. Clay Helton is on the hot seat. Okay. One of 2 things is going to happen with Clay Helton. He's going to get fired before the season even ends, or he's going to have a great season, win the South, and challenge somebody from the north. Listen, here's the bottom line. No matter how bad USC has been in the past few years, they're still USC. They can still pretty much, well, for the most part, not completely, but they can still pretty much pick and choose the state of California. I mean, if you're an elite college football player in California, Washington, or Oregon, most likely you're going to go to USC. There's a lot of people that are extremely high on this JT Daniels kid. They're saying that he really is one of the top 10, maybe even top 5 quarterbacks in the entire country. He's a sophomore. He's a young guy, and this supposedly could be his breakout year. They have a lot of talent. They just do. And so I think that, if you have a couple of years, 2 or 3, 4 years of a team like USC, who's a major program, who recruits really well, and they have some down years, then everyone just starts to write them off and sort of say, forget about them. But you can't forget about them. So outside of Utah, I mean, listen, UCLA's UCLA is terrible. Colorado's just not going to compete. Arizona State and Arizona, I just don't think they're going to compete either. Oregon State's a dumpster fire. So outside, I know people love Washington State for some reason, and I love the coach too, and that's all great. But Washington State is somebody that they're gimmicky. They just are. They run this air. They pass the balls 80% of the time. They run the air raid system. They can score a bunch of points, but they can also, if they play an elite defensive line, they're going to get shut out. It's just Washington State they're overrated. They just are. They're overrated. They might beat a really good team one week and they'll lose to Colorado the next week or something. It's just they're not consistent enough, and they are what they are. So I mean that sort of offense that they run there is a little bit outdated, and I just don't think they're going to ever win the Pac-12 here in the next few years. So there you have it, folks. That's my list. USC from the Pac-12, UVA from the ACC, Missouri from the SEC, TCU from the Big 12, and Nebraska from the Big 10. That's my dark horses to win their conference. The likelihood that any of those teams will win their conference is probably pretty low, but then again, that's what makes it a dark horse. Now, go ahead and leave your crying comments if you're a fan of any team that's not one of the ones I named. If you're a South Carolina fan, go ahead and cry about Missouri. Listen, if you're a Utah fan, go ahead and cry about me picking USC. If you're an Oklahoma State fan, or maybe even a Baylor fan, or I don't know, maybe a West Virginia fan, you can go ahead and cry about me picking TCU. If you're anybody in the Big Ten West not named Nebraska, go ahead and cry about that, Timmy, too. It doesn't matter. I'm always right and wrong at the same time. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete checking.